Thank you for joining us to learn more about fraternities at Tulane. We hope you can understand why we waited to record this tutorial until we knew details about the delayed start to the spring semester, and we appreciate your patience with the timing of the university's winter break closure. This tutorial is being recorded on Wednesday, January 5th, and the information is up to date as of today. My name is Liz Schafer, and I serve as the Director of Fraternity and Sorority Programs. I'm proud to work with the 40% of full-time undergraduate students here who belong to one of our 23 Greek letter social organizations. Our department is part of the Division of Student Affairs, and our staff is dedicated to providing an exceptional fraternity and sorority experience to our students. To name just a few of the things we do, we provide training to chapter and council officers on issues of organizational management and leadership development, work with national fraternity and sorority staff and local volunteers to support chapters, give guidance on program and event planning, and collaborate with various campus departments to provide resources and programming on topics such as violence prevention, health and wellness, recreation, and academic support. In this tutorial, we will answer the questions we most commonly hear from parents of students who are considering joining a fraternity. Of course, if after viewing the tutorial you still have questions, please don't hesitate to contact our staff. Tulane has 9 fraternities, each of which is affiliated with a national fraternity. The university affiliate groups are called chapters, so you will hear us and your students refer to either their fraternity or their chapter. All of these groups are grounded in values centered on brotherhood, scholarship, leadership, and service. It's important to note that these are all private organizations that have individual criteria for membership. The university does not control these criteria or how the chapters apply them. Each fraternity chapter at Tulane belongs to a student-run, staff-advised governing council. The councils are made up of chapters that are similar in size and do similar activities. You can see on your screen the names of each of our fraternities and the councils to which they belong. We have one active historically Black fraternity, which is part of our National Pan-Hellenic Council, or NPHC. They currently have 6 members. Our other 8 fraternities belong to our Interfraternity Council, or IFC. These groups currently average in size at 55. We are excited that our fraternity community is expanding in the coming months. Later this month, Kappa Sigma fraternity will officially reestablish their chapter at Tulane and participate in IFC recruitment. And just in the last few weeks, Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated started the process of establishing a chapter, while Phi Beta Sigma Fraternity Incorporated started the reestablishment process. Both of those groups belong to the NPHC. 7 of the IFC fraternities have houses, all of which are owned and managed either by local alumni of the fraternity or by the individual fraternity's National Housing Corporation. These facilities house between 7 and 10 members each. The only time a member may be required to live in the fraternity house is if he eventually serves in a particular chapter office, such as president or treasurer. The fraternities primarily use the houses as meeting spaces and a home away from home for their members. 4 of the fraternities provide a limited meal plan for their members at the chapter house, each with a professional chef. The university's dining services office allows members of these fraternities, including new first-year members, to drop down to a less expensive campus-based meal plan that offers a small number of meals as a complement to the chapter plan. Many parents wonder about the time commitment that joining a fraternity will bring. Like so many things in life, your son will get out of the fraternity what he puts into it. If he chooses to get involved with committees and events early on, he will spend a bit more time. But on average, most new members should expect to spend 5 to 10 hours per week attending new member education sessions to learn about the organization's history, chapter business meetings, or brotherhood or social events. If your son is already involved in one or more other student organizations, his new fraternity will view that as a benefit, not as a hindrance. We require each fraternity to submit to us a detailed plan for their new member or education and orientation program. Once we approve that plan, we require the organization's officers to send a copy of it to all new members. We encourage you to ask your son to send it to you so you will have a good idea of the chapter events and activities he will be attending. All our fraternities consider academic achievement to be an essential part of membership. An average GPA of fraternity members at Tulane has been higher than that of non-fraternity members for at least the last 15 years, and the fraternities compete fiercely with one another for the highest grades. You can view the GPA standings for each organization on our website, greek.tulane.edu, under the About Our Community heading. The costs of fraternity membership are listed on your screen. They vary somewhat by council, and the variance is based on a number of factors, including the size of the group, the number and type of activities they plan each year, and whether or not they have a house or sometimes provide meals for members. Regardless, it's important to note that the first semester of membership is more expensive because of one-time new member fees. Your son will also pay a Greek membership fee to the university each semester via his accounts receivable bill. The fee covers things in 3 basic categories: educational programming for members, social and community programming, and neighborhood relations. As you are probably aware, the university sets and maintains eligibility requirements of students who wish to join a fraternity or sorority. The requirements are straightforward and are listed on your screen. A couple of important notes, though. First is that we hold hard and fast to the minimum requirements and do not make exceptions to them. That means that if your son earns a 2.499 GPA, which is not a 2.5, he will not be able to participate. We take a hard line on the requirements because all our fraternities have those same minimums. So that means we don't make exceptions under any circumstances. Secondly, all potential new members must complete educational requirements before they begin the recruitment or intake process. All our first-year students, as well as upper division men who have indicated an interest in joining a fraternity, have been receiving monthly emails about the education requirements. If your student has questions about those requirements, please encourage him to contact our student assistants at greek@tulane.edu for information about how to complete them. Our NPHC fraternity, Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, brings in new members through a process called membership intake. Typically in the fall semester, the organization will host an informational meeting to help prospective members learn about the programs and activities they do. Following the informational, they will accept membership applications and vote on which applicants to invite to membership. We do not know yet when Alpha will conduct their next intake process, as they just completed it a few weeks ago. Interfraternity Council fraternities bring in new members through a process called recruitment. Informal IFC recruitment activities take place throughout the fall semester at Tulane, but students may not join until the spring. So you may have heard your son talk about attending recruitment events throughout the fall semester. IFC hosted monthly recruitment weeks this fall. During those weeks, the IFC students held an info session to introduce interested men to the recruitment process at the beginning of the week. Then each fraternity hosted introductory recruitment events for interested men. These were fairly casual, and they usually consisted of the type of activities that the chapters do together on a regular basis: playing video games or intramurals, watching football, things like that. We emailed all first-year men about these events several times throughout the fall, so hopefully your son took advantage of them as a way to meet fraternity members and start getting a sense of the different groups. From those introductory events and from meeting men in classes and student organizations and while going out, the fraternities decide who they are most interested in and form some relationships during the fall. Sometimes that means that first-year men are told in the fall that they will receive a bid or membership invitation in the spring. Students sometimes refer to these preliminary bids as, quote, dirty or illegal bids, but that's an incorrect characterization. It's fine for fraternities to have told a student in the fall that he will receive a bid in January if he meets the eligibility requirements. And it's also important to note that many fraternities still recruit in the spring, so students who have not received a preliminary bid will still have the opportunity to demonstrate their interest in the spring. Once spring classes begin, IFC recruitment kicks into high gear. Men interested in joining an IFC fraternity do not need to return to school early. That only applies to women participating in Panelists sorority recruitment. The men may return to campus when the residence halls open beginning on Saturday, January 22nd. We will host our final 2 recruitment info sessions on January 26th and 28th. Students who attended one of the fall info sessions don't have to attend either of these in January, but they're welcome to do so if they would like to talk with fraternity members. During the following 2 weeks, chapters will host individual events sponsored by the Interfraternity Council. These events are primarily focused on first-year students that fraternities haven't met and on transfer students and spring scholars. Students may attend events for as many or as few fraternities as they want, but we encourage them to keep their options open by attending several. On Thursday, February 10th, chapters will host invitation-only events so they can make their final decisions about which students to give bids to. A student who is not invited to a chapter's invitational event is no longer being considered by them for membership. Then on Friday the 11th, our staff, along with students from the Interfraternity Council, will issue bids to students. Earlier that day, we will call any students who registered for recruitment but will not be receiving any bids. Some students may receive bids from more than one organization. If your son is one of those students, he will likely know immediately which organization he would like to join. However, if he needs some time to think it through, he just needs to let one of our staff members know he's deferring his decision until Monday the 14th. While the overwhelming majority of students who want to join a fraternity at Tulane are able to, sometimes it doesn't work out. We work with our colleagues in other student affairs departments to make sure other options for campus involvement are available shortly after recruitment. The Spring Activities Expo is tentatively scheduled for early February, and attending it is a great way to learn about other student organizations on campus that can fill the void if your son had hoped to join a fraternity. And finally, it's important to know that not all students join fraternities in the spring of their first year. If your son is ineligible to participate this year, or if he participates and doesn't receive a bid, he can certainly go through recruitment either in this coming fall or next spring, although the fall opportunities tend to be a bit more limited. As your son goes through recruitment or considers intake, he will likely ask your advice about how to decide which organization he's most interested in. The most important factor in determining this is the fit he feels and his comfort level with the men in the group. The next factor to consider plays into the first, and that is how much the organization's values resonate with your son. All national fraternities were founded on a set of guiding principles, and the members should be able to articulate both the values themselves and how the chapter's activities reflect those values. Encourage your son to ask questions of the members that will help him determine the values that are important to each fraternity. Having a legacy relationship to an organization can be another factor in helping a student find the right fit. This can be tough if someone in your family is an alumnus of one of our organizations, but we really encourage you to let your son to make his own decision about which group is best for him, especially because chapters of the same organization can be very different on different campuses. And even our chapters here at Tulane change over the years. Tulane is not a campus that relies heavily on legacy relationships with alumni members. The great majority of students here don't have a legacy of Greek membership in their families. And so to the current members, a legacy relationship is an interesting fact about a prospective member. But because it's not something they generally have experienced themselves, it's frankly not as important to them as it is to the family of the potential member. We also want to make you aware of the dangers of your son joining an underground group, which he may refer to as, quote, off campus or unrecognized. The potential for hazing, alcohol abuse, and all-around trouble and danger is much higher with the underground groups. Alpha Epsilon Pi, or AEPi, sometimes associated with the street address 828 Broadway, Delta Kappa Epsilon, or DEEC, Sigma Alpha Mu, or SAMI, and Sigma Phi Epsilon, or SIGEP, are all IFC organizations that had active chapters at Tulane in the past. These groups were shut down either by their national organization, by the university, or by us and them cooperatively because of serious disciplinary issues related to alcohol and hazing. We do not have any knowledge that DEEC is actively recruiting, but we do believe former members of SIGEP, AEPi, and SAMI may be operating underground and trying to recruit first-year students. In recent years, we've heard reports of first-year students who did not make connections to recognized fraternities in the fall semester and believe they were better off joining an underground group than not joining any fraternity. We've also received reports that members of these groups are lying to first-year students and saying they will be back on campus in the next few months. That is patently false. It's important to understand that these groups of students are simply that, groups of students. They're not a fraternity. They're not an organization. They operate without any accountability or real structure and without the oversight, training, and education provided by our staff and their national headquarters staff. Your son may be placing himself in danger if he affiliates with one of these groups, and he may also face charges for violating the Code of Student Conduct. He may also subject you to monetary liability if an accident occurs, as these groups of students do not have any insurance beyond their family's personal policies. If your son has mentioned an interest in one of these groups and you would like more information, please don't hesitate to call our staff. Shifting gears a bit, I want to talk a little about alcohol. You've undoubtedly seen the news stories about the tragic deaths of fraternity members over the last few years. Many of the most serious issues facing college students, from crime to sexual violence to hazing, are in some way related to alcohol. You may also be aware that President Mike Fitz has in recent years called for the university community to change the campus's culture around alcohol use. We're fortunate that several years ago, our VP for Student Affairs convened a steering committee comprised of Tulane board members, senior administrators, faculty, staff, and alumni chapter advisors to create a long-range plan for Greek life here. That committee has recently shifted its work to focus on ways the Greek community can lead the way in changing that alcohol culture. Concurrently, our student leaders have been working with us to make improvements from the inside. Their efforts have resulted in improvements to our potential new member education series and in new initiatives to limit overconsumption of alcohol at fraternity and sorority parties. They no longer allow first-year students to attend events with alcohol at their chapter houses for the first 4 weeks of each fall semester. Most exciting is a program started last year called the Greek Ambassadors. Approximately 45 students who are members of fraternities and sororities are ambassadors, and they serve as peer educators on topics primarily related to health and safety. These students facilitated the small group conversations that were part of our potential new member education series this year. And beginning in the spring, they will also offer fraternity and sorority chapters programs about alcohol and other drugs, sexual violence prevention, and other health and wellness topics. For those of you whose students will join the Greek community, we want to spend some time talking about hazing prevention. The university's definition of hazing is on your screen. Students joining fraternities should understand that their organizations can be held responsible for violating the hazing policy, even if the new members willingly participate in an activity that the university deems inappropriate. Experts have identified 3 general categories of hazing activities. The first is subtle hazing. This includes making new members perform tasks that older members don't have to perform. For example, cleaning up after a meal at the chapter house. Subtle hazing can also include things like making new members earn the right to wear organizational insignia, a forced workout regimen early in the morning, or being expected to camp out for a good spot on the Mardi Gras parade route. Next is harassment hazing. This may include assigning new members to perform pranks, wear silly clothing, or at all times carry a particular object. It also may include lineups of new members during which they're expected to remember or recite insignificant details about the organization's history or about a particular member. Harassment hazing often includes a variety of demeaning aspects or things that are misogynistic or homophobic. The final type of hazing is violent hazing. This type includes some of the sensational acts you may hear about in media reports: kidnapping new members, physical abuse, paddling, and forced alcohol or drug consumption. At Tulane, subtle hazing and harassment hazing are the most common forms. Pressure to consume alcohol is more common than actual forced drinking, but it is an issue nonetheless. One thing we try to drill into the minds of our students is that there is a very slippery slope involved if they engage in so-called lower order hazing. They often don't know the physical and mental health histories of their new members. So for example, pressure drinking can cause serious issues for a new member with a history of depression and anxiety. Another issue is that within an organization, different people can have very different views of what constitutes hazing. What seems harmless to some people can seem completely inappropriate and dangerous to others. Last year, the Tulane Police Department and Office of Student Conduct investigated complaints about potential hazing against 4 fraternities. Allegations against Kappa Alpha, also known as KA, Phi Gamma Delta, also known as Fiji, and Zeta Psi were determined to be unfounded. Delta Tau Delta, also known as DELT, was found responsible for a lesser charge, and the incident was minor enough that it resulted in educational and corrective sanctions only, no suspension of operations. It's important to note that all of these investigations were the result of concerns reported in confidence to the university. Reports of hazing concerns allow our staff to work with the student leaders of fraternities to make changes to their operations and traditions when appropriate, or in more serious cases, to step in and shut down operations to protect our students' health and safety. We also want to highlight some state laws addressing hazing that were recently enacted by the Louisiana legislature. In response to the 2017 tragic hazing-related death of Max Gruber, an LSU fraternity new member, the state legislature adopted new statutes during their spring 2018 session. They further amended and strengthened those laws in 2019. One of those criminalized hazing, moving it from a misdemeanor to a felony with much more serious penalties than had existed before. Another updated the definition of hazing and now requires higher education institutions to provide hazing prevention education to their students. A third new statute creates an obligation to report hazing and to offer reasonable assistance including seeking medical assistance to someone who has suffered serious bodily injury caused by reckless behavior, including hazing. If at any point during your son's time in a fraternity, you have questions about whether he or a friend in another organization is being hazed, there are several resources you can consult. Of course, you can always call and speak to a member of our staff. And frankly, that's often the best method, as it allows us the opportunity to ask clarifying questions about what is happening and to decide how best to address the situation. But if you're uncomfortable doing that, you may file an online report at the website tulane.edu/concerns, or leave a message on our hazing hotline at 504-862-3111. If you make a report or call to ask a question, you can ask that we keep your identity confidential, and we will do so to the extent the law allows us. But I implore you to give us your contact information so we can follow up with any clarifying questions we may have. As a parent myself, nothing is more frustrating and concerning to me than receiving a report that something potentially dangerous is happening, but not having enough information to stop it. If nothing else, please give us as much detail as possible when submitting an anonymous report. What, when, where, and to whom something is happening or has happened, so we have specifics to ask the organization's members. Not surprisingly, if all we can say is, we got a report that your chapter was hazing, our investigation cannot be very comprehensive. We have far more success if we're able to ask about specific people, dates and times, timelines, locations, and activities. Finally, there's a great deal of information available online for parents who want to know more. A list of websites, in addition to greek.tulane.edu, is on your screen, and I encourage you to consult those. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you have questions that were not answered by this tutorial, please feel free to contact us. We look forward to seeing your sons in just a few weeks.